There's always one person in the room who never raises their voice. Everyone listens anyway. You've seen it. You never understood why. How silence became the most misunderstood form of power. Most people spend their entire lives chasing the wrong signal. They believe influence belongs to whoever speaks first, loudest, most confidently. They practice their delivery. They sharpen their arguments. They fill every pause because silence feels like losing ground. And then they meet someone who barely speaks, and somehow that person owns the room. That moment is disorienting, because nothing in how most people were raised explains it. Schools reward the students who answer fastest. Workplaces promote the ones who present most visibly. Social media amplifies whoever makes the most noise. The entire architecture of modern life is built on the assumption that visibility equals value. But there is a layer underneath that architecture that operates by completely different rules. In every high-stakes environment, whether it is a negotiation table, a military command structure, a boardroom, or a social dynamic that determines who gets respected and who gets used, the people who accumulate real influence over time are almost never the loudest ones in the room. They are the ones who make others feel observed without being obvious about it. This is not a personality trait. It is a strategic orientation, and it works because of something deeply embedded in how human beings process social hierarchy. When someone speaks constantly, they become readable, predictable. The environment maps them quickly and adjusts. But when someone speaks rarely and deliberately, the environment cannot complete that map. And what cannot be fully mapped is automatically treated with more caution, more weight, more respect. There is a reason why the most enduring figures of influence across history, from battlefield commanders to negotiators who change the outcomes of conflicts without firing a single shot, shared one behavioral pattern that biographers consistently noted but rarely analyze. They were extraordinarily selective about when they spoke, not because they had less to say, because they understood something that most people never will. Every word you choose not to say is information your opponent cannot use against you. And information withheld is power accumulated. The question worth sitting with is not how to speak better. It is this: what would change in your closest relationships and most critical professional situations if you spoke half as much and listened twice as carefully? If this channel is new to you, you're in the right place. Stay with it. Why reacting always costs more than staying silent, even when you're right. There is a specific moment when most people lose everything they spent months building. It does not happen in a public failure. It does not happen in a visible defeat. It happens in a reaction. One dismissive comment. One look that reads like a challenge. One small provocation designed, consciously or not, to pull a response. And in less than 3 seconds, someone who had carefully constructed a reputation for composure hands it all back, because the impulse to respond felt more urgent than the consequence of responding. This is not a character flaw. It is biology operating in the wrong environment. The human nervous system was built for immediate threat response, because for most of human history, a threat meant physical danger that required instant action. But the modern landscape of power does not operate on those terms. Corporate dynamics, social hierarchies, professional relationships, family negotiations, none of these reward the fastest reaction. They reward the most calibrated one. And calibration requires something most people were never taught: the ability to let a moment pass without filling it. When someone provokes you and you respond immediately, you reveal the architecture of your vulnerabilities. You show where the armor is thin. You confirm which buttons, when pressed, produce a predictable output. And anyone who understands social dynamics, whether they are aware of it or not, files that information and uses it later. Trained negotiators know this at a level most professionals never reach. They are taught to sit inside uncomfortable silence rather than break it, because the person who speaks first during a tense pause almost always concedes more. The one who holds the discomfort controls the tempo of the entire exchange. This principle does not stay in the negotiation room. It operates in performance reviews, in arguments with people close to you, in moments where someone tests whether you can be rattled. The person who breathes, pauses, and does not react on schedule is not being passive. They are refusing to be predictable. And unpredictability, in any power dynamic is structural leverage. Here is the question that cuts deep. Think about the last time you reacted immediately instead of pausing. Did you win anything real? Or did the reaction just feel necessary in the moment? Drop that in the comments. The pattern people describe there is more consistent than most expect. How the mind that needs nothing from the room ends up owning it. There is a difference between being respected and being tolerated. Most people live their entire professional and personal lives in the second category while believing they are in the first. The difference is not performance. It is not credentials. It is not even competence, though competence matters. The real difference is one thing. The degree to which a person's sense of self depends on external confirmation. Watch how people move through a room when they believe something important is at stake. Watch the slight adjustment in posture when someone influential walks in. Watch the tone shift when a person realizes they are being evaluated. Watch how the energy changes in someone who needs the outcome to validate them. That shift is visible. It is processed automatically by every person in the environment. And what it communicates, before a single word is spoken, is dependency. Dependency does not generate respect. It generates a particular kind of social calculation where others begin to sense they hold leverage, even when they could not explain why. Now watch someone who does not shift. Someone whose internal state does not visibly reorganize when the stakes change. Someone who speaks the same, moves the same, holds the same level of eye contact whether they are talking to a peer or someone who could end their career with a phone call. That quality is what human beings have always read as authority. Not the title, not the volume, the stillness. There is a behavioral law running under the surface here. Scarcity increases perceived value. The person who rarely speaks makes each word carry more weight. The person who does not explain every decision makes each decision feel more final. The person who is not available for every interaction becomes the one whose attention feels significant when it finally arrives. This is not coldness. It is the understanding that what is freely given is automatically valued less than what must be earned. Every culture that has produced lasting systems of influence understood this. From the deliberate restraint built into classical military leadership to the disciplined economy of words practiced by figures whose authority outlasted their lifetimes. Most people try to build presence by adding more words, more visibility, more noise. The ones who actually own the room got there by subtracting. If this is resonating, the like is the clearest signal you can send. It also tells the algorithm this content is worth spreading. Why? The most dangerous person in any room is the one you underestimated. There is a category of person that almost no one talks about because, by definition, no one notices them until it is too late. They are not the loudest in the meeting. They are not the most visibly confident at the table. They do not announce their assessments before all the information is in. They do not compete for the first word or the last one. They watch. And in watching, they collect something that the performers at the front of the room never accumulate, an accurate picture of how everyone else actually operates, who needs to be seen, who makes decisions from ego, who holds real influence versus positional authority, who can be trusted under pressure, and who folds the moment the stakes become personal. This map is extraordinarily valuable, and it is only available to the person who is not busy managing their own performance. Here is what makes this dynamic structurally significant rather than just observationally interesting. The person who watches and says little becomes illegible to the room. And illegibility in any power structure functions as a form of protection. When you are readable, others can predict you. When you are predictable, others can position against you. When you are illegible, the environment defaults to caution. And caution directed at you, even when it has no rational basis, produces the same behavioral output as respect. Research on group dynamics consistently finds that quieter members are systematically overestimated in competence by their peers, even when objective measures do not support that perception. The silence creates a gap. The human brain fills gaps with projection. In competitive environments, it projects threat. In collaborative ones, it projects depth. Neither projection was earned. Both are useful. This is not a manipulation tactic. It is an observation about how social cognition operates, and the recognition that most people are unknowingly working against themselves by making themselves too easy to read, too quick to explain, too eager to be understood in the moment. The ancient warrior traditions that produced some of history's most effective strategists shared a core principle across cultures: the fighter who needs to demonstrate strength before the engagement has already weakened his position. Strength shown is strength spent. The room never tells you when it has decided what you are. It just starts treating you accordingly. How to build the kind of presence that does not require permission to be felt. There is a version of silence that comes from having nothing to say, and there is a version that comes from understanding that speaking would cost more than staying quiet. The first is absence. The second is mastery. And the distance between those two things is where the real work lives. Emotional control, the kind that actually functions under pressure rather than just in theory, is not suppression. It is not the performance of calm over genuine chaos. It is something more precise: the developed ability to observe your own internal state without being automatically governed by it. To feel the pull toward reaction, the urgency to defend, the impulse to explain, and still retain the choice of whether any of that reaches the surface. That interval between stimulus and response is where power lives. Most people have never been taught it exists. Every serious philosophical system that survived long enough to be tested across generations arrived at a version of the same conclusion through completely different paths. The Stoic frameworks of ancient Rome built entire practices around the discipline of the pause before response. The warrior traditions of feudal Japan treated emotional restraint not as passivity, but as the highest form of readiness. What they had in common was the recognition that the hardest opponent is never in the room across from you. It is the impulse inside you that wants to react before you have thought. Mental strength in this context is not hardness. It is flexibility under load, the capacity to remain stable when the environment is specifically designed, intentionally or not, to pull you off balance. And it is precisely that stability that the environment reads as authority, because authority has always been, at its core, the projection of someone who does not need external conditions to be different in order to function. Every time you absorb a provocation without reacting, you deposit something into how others perceive you. Every time you hold silence when the room expects you to fill it, you deposit something. Those deposits compound. The perception they build is not one you can manufacture consciously. It is one that forms in others without their awareness. The environments that will test this are coming whether you prepare or not. The situations that will pull at your reactivity are already scheduled, even if you do not know their names yet. What you do with the space between what happens and what you choose to do next is the only variable that is entirely yours. That is where absolute power begins. Not in the volume, in the pause. If this shifted something in how you see silence and control, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video goes deeper into the layer underneath this one. And one question to leave you with, one worth actually thinking about before you scroll. What is one situation in your life right now where choosing silence would change your position? Leave it in the comments. Before responding in any high-pressure situation, pause consciously for 3 seconds. In that window, ask one internal question: does this response serve my position, or does it only discharge what I am feeling right now? If the answer is the second one, do not speak. Hold it. Watch what the environment does when you do not respond on schedule. This single practice, applied consistently over 2 weeks across professional and personal situations, restructures how others perceive your authority in ways that no performance or credential can replicate. Not because you will appear different, because you will actually be different.